Aamira Nazeef was a soft-spoken newlywed clinging to hope. Jameel Qadir was the charming husband hiding a monstrous secret. And Sahira Malook was the seductive neighbor who turned their marriage into a ticking time bomb. What started as a 4-month union built on faith ended in betrayal, abuse, and a suitcase containing the horrifying truth. Aamira Nazeef's wedding was everything her family had dreamed of: simple, graceful, and filled with prayers for a happy life ahead. At just 24 years old, Aamira entered her marriage to Jameel Qadir with the kind of hope many young women carry. Raised in a quiet neighborhood of Rawalpindi, she had spent her life focused on faith, family, and learning the duties of a good wife. Jameel, a 31-year-old textile manager, came across as an ideal match. He was well-settled, soft-spoken, and respected in the community for his religious discipline. To the outside world, they looked like a couple destined for peace and stability. The first few weeks were calm. Jameel complimented her cooking, accompanied her to Friday prayers, and even gifted her a set of golden bangles after their first month together. Aamira was shy but felt slowly drawn to him. She maintained the house, called his mother daily, and fulfilled every role she believed a good wife should. Even small acts like ironing his clothes or making him tea before work made her feel closer to him. But something about Jameel was hard to read. He was never overly affectionate, and although he fulfilled his basic duties, he remained emotionally distant. She assumed he needed more time to open up. After all, their marriage was arranged, and he had lived alone for several years. Things began to change around the end of the second month. Jameel started coming home later than usual, often brushing off her questions with vague excuses about overtime at the factory. His phone, once casually left on the dining table, was now locked and always in his pocket. Aamira noticed missed calls from a contact labeled only with an emoji, and strange smells on his clothes, faint perfume she didn't own. He stopped eating her food and began criticizing her appearance subtly, calling her too quiet, too plain, too conservative. Each comment chipped away at her self-esteem, but she held back from complaining. Her parents had warned her, marriage is about patience, not perfection. By the third month, the changes became more pronounced. Jameel had started sleeping on the far side of the bed or in the living room altogether. Aamira began keeping a notebook, tracking his unusual behaviors: phone calls taken in the balcony, small lies about being at work when the factory was closed, and strange tension in his eyes. She wasn't the only one noticing. Rasha, Jameel's younger sister who lived nearby, remarked during a visit that Jameel had changed. He was once a man of routine, but now seemed distracted and restless. In the fourth month, a woman entered the picture, not through direct interaction, but through the whispers of neighbors. Sahira Malook. She lived 2 doors away, a widow with no children, known for her modern appearance and aloof behavior. Most women in the street avoided her, but Jameel had started visiting her home under the guise of helping her with maintenance issues. Once, Aamira saw him coming out of Sahira's house at dusk, his face unreadable and his shirt slightly creased. When she asked about it, he shrugged and told her not to behave like a suspicious wife. That night marked a turning point. Jameel raised his voice for the first time. Aamira was stunned, frozen by fear and disbelief. The next day, he returned, with a forced smile and an apology, blaming stress. But the damage was done. Aamira began to fear the man she had once trusted. Her home no longer felt like a safe place. In her solitude, she turned to her faith more deeply, praying for answers, for clarity, for peace. But as the days passed, it became clear that something dark had taken root inside her marriage. The Jameel she had married was slipping further away, and in his place stood someone she barely recognized, someone who seemed to be living a life she was never meant to be part of. The woman next door, Sahira Malook, became an unspoken presence in Aamira's life. Though they had never exchanged more than polite greetings, Aamira felt her existence press against the fragile walls of her marriage, like a shadow creeping under a door. Sahira's reputation in the neighborhood was well known. She was elegant, always dressed sharply, even in casual moments, and had a habit of keeping to herself. Her husband had died 3 years prior, and since then, she had lived alone in her well-kept house with minimal contact with others. While most women gossiped about her independence and attitude, Jameel seemed drawn to it. Aamira first started feeling uneasy when she noticed how often Jameel glanced toward Sahira's home. Once, while sweeping the courtyard, she saw him pause on their veranda, staring at Sahira's front door before pretending to check his phone. Another day, she found Sahira's name scribbled on a small paper inside his pocket. She didn't confront him. Instead, she folded the paper and burned it in the sink, as if getting rid of it could also rid her of the anxiety growing inside her. As Jameel's visits to Sahira became more frequent, Aamira's world began to crumble. Silently, he now left for quick errands and disappeared for hours. He'd return with cologne she had never smelled before and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Her questions were met with annoyance. He claimed Sahira needed help fixing her water line, installing a window lock, or moving furniture, excuses that piled up like lies meant to be believed only once. The subtle rage in his voice when questioned forced Aamira into silence. Neighbors began to whisper. Aamira could sense their pity during short exchanges at the market. Some offered glances filled with sympathy, while others gave awkward smiles and looked away. One afternoon, while returning from the tailor, Aamira overheard 2 women murmuring about how Jameel had been seen laughing outside Sahira's house, his hand resting lightly on her gate. That night, Aamira cried silently into her pillow, unsure whether the pain she felt was from betrayal, humiliation, or fear of what her life was becoming. Jameel's behavior turned darker. His affection became non-existent. Instead, he grew cold, irritable, and sometimes aggressive. The first time he slapped her, it wasn't out of rage. It was controlled, calculated, almost rehearsed. He told her to mind her own business, that a wife should stay within her limits. That was when she understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was who he was now. Days passed with routine violence and suffocating silence. He never hit her in places. That showed he didn't need to. His words were enough to break her down. She stopped dressing up. She ate less. She stopped calling her parents out of shame. Her eyes lost their shine, and even her prayers became whispers of desperation. One evening, Rasha came over unannounced. Aamira quickly covered the bruise near her temple with her scarf. Rasha noticed but said nothing. Instead, she offered to stay for tea. During the short visit, Jameel walked in, visibly tense at the sight of his sister. He gave vague answers to her questions and refused to sit for tea. When he left the room, Rasha looked at Aamira, her eyes filled with suspicion and concern. But Aamira only smiled weakly, afraid that speaking out might invite more punishment. Later that week, Sahira posted a photo online, a selfie taken near her living room mirror. In the reflection stood a man, half-turned, clearly Jameel. Though the image was subtle, the detail didn't go unnoticed. Screenshots circulated through group chats. The scandal hit the street like wildfire. People speculated, whispered, and finally confirmed what Aamira had feared all along. Jameel's affair with Sahira was no longer a secret, but instead of shame, Jameel came home angrier than ever. He screamed, accused Aamira of betrayal for ruining his reputation, even though she hadn't said a word to anyone. He became unpredictable, volatile. Aamira sensed that something worse was coming. What she didn't know was that her time was quickly running out, and the betrayal she thought she had already tasted was only the beginning. The bruises on Aamira's body became as common as the silence in her home. They appeared like stains after rain, dark, spreading, and painful reminders of the life she now endured. Her once peaceful days were replaced with calculating steps, carefully avoiding anything that might ignite Jameel's temper. She no longer asked questions. She no longer looked him in the eyes. But the tension in the air grew thicker with each passing day. Jameel's affair with Sahira Malook was no longer a rumor. It was a quiet fact that everyone accepted, but no one dared to speak about openly. Aamira Qadir had seen enough. After the viral image of Sahira's selfie surfaced, her suspicions hardened into certainty. She started observing her brother's behavior more closely. He was dressing better, spending more money, and rarely at home. A few times she followed him in her car, parking at a distance, watching as he slipped into Sahira's house without knocking, as if it were his second home. But she remained silent, torn between protecting her family's name and the guilt of knowing Aamira was suffering. Aamira kept track of Jameel's patterns. She started writing everything in a hidden journal: dates, times, his mood swings, the injuries, and even the names of people who had witnessed his behavior. She knew deep down that the situation was dangerous, but her instincts told her to gather evidence, as if preparing herself for something she couldn't fully explain. Every page in the journal was written with trembling hands. Still, it gave her some sense of control, even if false. One morning, while Jameel was in the shower, she found his phone left unlocked. Her heart raced as she opened it, not out of curiosity, but desperation. She scrolled through the messages. There they were, conversations with Sahira that revealed everything. They discussed their late-night meetings, plans for the future, even complaints about Aamira. One message chilled her to the bone. "She's getting suspicious. I'll handle it." That single sentence confirmed what she feared the most. He was planning something. And it wasn't just divorce. Aamira transferred the screenshots to her email, deleted all traces, and locked the phone again. But the fear stayed. She began sleeping with the door locked, though it didn't make her feel safer. Jameel's anger had reached a new level. He no longer cared who heard him shouting. His threats grew crueler. "You'll regret this," became his favorite line. Aamira didn't know if it meant further abuse or something worse. Either way, her fear was no longer just emotional, it was physical, urgent, and alive. Rasha finally confronted Aamira one afternoon when she dropped by with groceries. She gently touched Amira's arm, revealing a fresh bruise, and whispered, "You don't have to live like this." Aamira broke down. Between sobs, she revealed the truth about everything. The beatings, the affair, the message on his phone. Rasha was horrified. She promised to protect her. They decided Aamira would stay at her parents' house for a few days, while Rasha found a way to confront Jameel or involve someone who could. But fate didn't allow that plan to unfold. 2 nights later, Aamira disappeared. Her parents tried calling but received no answer. Rasha rushed to the house, only to find it locked from the outside. The neighbors claimed they hadn't seen Aamira in 2 days. Jameel was nowhere to be found either. When he returned the following day, he claimed Aamira had left after a fight. He showed fake concern and said she must have run away after feeling depressed, but no belongings were missing. Her clothes, her shoes, even her phone were still in the house, except the journal. It was gone. Rasha didn't believe a word. She went straight to the police and filed a missing persons report. Her brother was no longer just a man having an affair. He was now a suspect. Detective Murad Villani was assigned to the case, and within hours, he uncovered the first clue: Aamira's phone hidden under the wardrobe, wiped clean but with signs of recent use. What began as domestic suffering had now crossed into something far more sinister. Aamira hadn't run away. She had vanished, and someone knew exactly where she was. Detective Murad Villani had handled his fair share of missing person cases, but something about Aamira Nazeef's disappearance struck him differently. Her background was quiet: no mental health issues, no signs of impulsiveness, no history of running away. Her phone found hidden in the home raised immediate red flags. People who choose to vanish rarely leave behind their only form of communication. That same night, he requested surveillance footage from around the neighborhood and began collecting witness statements. Within 48 hours, the case changed from missing person to suspected foul play. The footage told a silent story that no one had expected. At 3:27 a.m. on the night Aamira was last seen, grainy security camera footage from a neighbor's front yard showed Jameel dragging a large, black suitcase toward the back of his car. His movements were stiff and hurried. The street was empty. There were no goodbyes, no second person, just Jameel and the heavy suitcase. 2 hours later, a separate camera from a commercial building on the outskirts of the city captured his car near an abandoned textile warehouse once owned by his father's business. He wasn't seen again on any camera until sunrise. Murad and his team followed the digital trail. At the old warehouse, which had been out of operation for nearly 5 years, they found the large metal gate rusted shut but easily forced open. The inside was full of dust, cobwebs, and scattered debris from a forgotten era. It took them 4 hours to search the entire space. Behind a stack of old sewing machines, beneath a broken floor panel covered in plastic sheeting, they found the suitcase. It was sealed tight with electrical tape and rope. When opened, the contents inside would shock even the most seasoned officer. Aamira's body, curled unnaturally and wrapped in layers of cloth, had been crammed inside like an object discarded, hidden. Her face was swollen, her hands bore bruises from what looked like defensive wounds. She had fought back. An autopsy later revealed blunt force trauma to the head as the cause of death. The wounds suggested that she had been attacked with a heavy object, possibly a metal rod. There was something else in the suitcase, an old wedding photo, ripped in half, showing only Aamira's face smiling brightly in her bridal attire. The other half, likely Jameel's, was missing. That haunting detail turned a brutal murder into a message. It wasn't just about getting rid of her. It was personal, calculated. Back at the police station, Jameel was arrested while at his office, pretending to continue life as usual. When confronted with the footage and evidence, he claimed he had blacked out after a fight and didn't remember what happened. His expression remained cold, detached. There were no tears, no regret, just silence. Further investigation into his phone revealed dozens of voice messages between him and Sahira Malook. The conversations revealed not only a growing obsession between the two, but also dangerous planning. Sahira often spoke in coded language, referring to Aamira as the problem, and once chillingly said, "If she disappears, everything clears up." Authorities raided Sahira's home next, only to find it empty. She had packed up and left 2 days before Aamira's body was discovered. A flight booking showed she had flown to Kuala Lumpur using a second passport. Her neighbors had assumed she was just visiting family. Interpol was immediately alerted, and an international warrant was issued. Jameel remained in custody, now formally charged with murder, obstruction of justice, and disposal of a body. The community that once respected him as a religious and stable man now watched in disbelief. Their quiet street had become the setting for a story no one saw coming. News channels began covering the case nationally. Social media exploded with outrage, sympathy, and calls for justice. And in the middle of it all, one truth stood out: Aamira's life had been silenced by the very person who had promised to protect her. But her story wasn't going to end in silence. It was just beginning to speak. The trial of Jameel Qadir began under intense public scrutiny. The courtroom was packed on the first day, with media, activists, and heartbroken family members all waiting to hear how a seemingly ordinary man could commit such a horrifying crime. Aamira's parents sat quietly, clutching a photo of their daughter in her wedding dress, her smile frozen in time. The prosecution presented a detailed and chilling timeline of manipulation, abuse, and premeditated murder. But what shocked the court more were the recovered voice notes from Jameel's phone. In one, Sahira could be heard laughing, telling him, "No one will miss her. She's just a shadow." It wasn't just physical abuse, it was psychological. Warfare carried out with deliberate cruelty. Jameel showed little emotion throughout the proceedings. His defense tried to argue that he was pushed to the edge by marital stress and emotional manipulation by Sahira. But the evidence left little room for sympathy. The journal Aamira had secretly kept was produced in court, documenting dates of beatings, names of people she feared, and even a chilling line written just 5 days before her death: "If I vanish, don't believe I left on my own." Those words turned her into the most powerful witness in the room. Her pain, though silenced in life, echoed clearly through her words. Meanwhile, Sahira Malook remained at large. The international warrant led to a massive manhunt. Eventually, she was located in a rented apartment on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. Malaysian authorities arrested her quietly in the middle of the night. She had changed her appearance and used a fake name, but her past had caught up. After her extradition, she was brought back to Pakistan to face charges of conspiracy, aiding and abetting murder, and obstruction of justice. Her demeanor in court was icy and unapologetic. She claimed she never asked him to kill his wife, but admitted that she had wanted Aamira gone. Testimonies from neighbors, Sahira Qadir, and even Jameel's co-workers painted a damning picture. The affair had been an open secret, with Sahira flaunting her influence over Jameel, while Aamira suffered in silence just a few feet away. Sahira's emotional statement in court revealed her regret for not acting sooner, saying, "I saw the bruises. I knew something was wrong. I thought silence would protect her. It didn't." The verdict came after 4 weeks of harrowing testimony. Jameel was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing his lack of remorse and the cruelty of his crime. Sahira was sentenced to 20 years for her role, with an additional 5 years for fleeing the country. As the sentence was read, Aamira's mother wept silently, her tears a mix of grief and relief. In the aftermath, the case became a turning point in the national conversation about domestic abuse in Pakistan. Aamira's story was shared in schools, mosques, and women's shelters as a grim reminder of what silence can cost. Rasha launched a foundation in her sister-in-law's name, offering legal aid and shelter to women in abusive marriages. The foundation, the Aamira Voice Project, gained national attention, helping women document abuse and connect with counselors and lawyers in secret. The house where Aamira once lived was eventually sold. New residents moved in, unaware of its past. But for those who knew her story, the image of the gentle, soft-spoken bride trapped in a nightmare remained haunting. In Rawalpindi's narrow streets, Aamira's name became a symbol not of weakness, but of quiet strength, of a woman who, even in her final days, documented her truth with the hope that someone would one day read it. And someone did. The pages of her journal, found near her body, became the key that unlocked justice. It proved that even when voices are silenced, the truth has a way of being heard. Aamira's life may have ended in brutality, but her story continues, written in courtrooms, whispered in prayer, and carried in the hearts of countless women who refuse to stay silent ever again.